So in the spring of 2006, I was a Pentecostal on my way and in the process of becoming an ordained minister in the Lutheran church. Now, how a Pentecostal was on her way to do such a thing, that's a story for another day. But because I was raised Pentecostal and there's some things that you can't shake, I'd like to testify this afternoon. And I'd like to share with you just a piece of my conversion story. And that began precisely in seminary. As I said, I arrived as a Pentecostal Latina, 1.5 generation, which means that I was born in Puerto Rico, but now had been raised in the United States. And so here I am in this seminary, which happened to be the Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia. And I was taking a course with Dr. Timothy Wengert, Lutheran Confessions. And mind you, this had been after a very difficult semester, first semester, where I was confronted with a whole lot of things that I didn't expect. The first thing was that when I thought of seminary as a Pentecostal, it was really more of a monastery that I had in my mind. I was thinking that most people would be praying and fasting all the time and, reading the Bible and reciting the text all the time. And instead, what I found was that there was beer at every single meeting and wine, and everyone was just so free to be who they were. And I was just very conflicted by this, and I didn't exactly know what I was doing in this place, in this space. So second semester comes around, and Dr. Wengert is giving his lecture on justification by grace through faith in Christ and Christ's righteousness. And I was thinking to myself, well, how did I miss this? I mean, I know the text. I've known the text all my life. How is it possible that I had never registered this unbelievable idea? And so he moved away. Those of you who know Dr. Wengert, he's a manuscript professor and preacher. And this moment, he decides to move away from his manuscript. And it so happens that I was on his left side of the room, and he points to my area, and he says, when you understand that God chose for you to be saved and not the other way around, then you'll understand God's amazing grace. Well, needless to say, I got this sudden knot in my throat, and I'm thinking, something just happened. I've never heard of such a thing. And everyone around me seems to say, yeah, well, that's old news. And I'm just like, no, this just did something to me. And it changed immediately my perspective. And suddenly, I understood why I was a Pentecostal in a Lutheran seminary on my way to become a Lutheran pastor. It was the gospel. I had been addressed by this gospel, by this word of grace, and now somehow arrested by it. And so what happened as a result was that I became extremely eager to understand, how do I translate this gospel message to people like me? People like the majority of the Latinos in your community that are not raised Lutheran, but will for some reason come into your congregations. How do I engage in a dialogue with people who really, really understand or have a personal relationship with the biblical text and have a personal relationship with God, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit that is unlike any other, and yet also be able to engage them with this theological liberation theology that I had experienced. And so because I was so eager to understand in liturgy classes and in theology classes, I always had my hand up in the air. How do I preach this to my family in the Bronx, New York? How do I take this to my urban setting? How do I share this particular liturgy and ordo and this thing that you call the hymnal? What is that? I mean, I never had a hymnal. It was all about knowing the song. How did we know the songs? God only knows. I have no idea, but we learned them. We learned them, and we never had a hymnal. We didn't need it, We were in worship. We were in worship, and we were free to worship. So I should just want to share just a little bit more about my story. Like I said, I was very convinced that now I would become a Lutheran pastor. This was the gospel message that I wanted to preach to my people, to people like me who would come to this community and not really understand what was going on, but I had a true relationship with the Trinity. Well, I wanted to be a pastor, but people around me, there's a distinction between internal call and external call. Well, I had internally accepted that I would be a pastor, but my community and faculty were saying, well, they were calling me to do PhD work, and the struggle, that's another story for another day. But when I started thinking, what is it that I want to learn? What is it that I want to engage? Was precisely what was happening within me and what was happening with my own family. And so I began researching and learning more and more about myself. And there was a season that I was really, really claiming, I'm Lutheran, I'm Lutheran, I'm Lutheran, grace all the time, I'm Lutheran. And the more I started thinking about how it was that I was living out my religion, living out my belief, living out my vocation, the more I realized that I wasn't Lutheran like everyone else understood Lutheran to be. But then, of course, I wasn't Pentecostal like everyone else that I knew understood Pentecostal to be. And so I am a self-proclaimed Luthercostal. And I found that I'm not the only one, which is very, very, very exciting. And well, going back to my research, one of the things that I was engaged with and was really, really drawn to was this work that the Roman Catholic Church is doing and has been doing since 2006. And they call it receptive ecumenism. And how they define that is, they say the essential principle behind receptive ecumenism is that the primary ecumenical responsibility is to ask not what do other traditions first need to learn from us, but what do we need to learn from them. The assumption is that if all were asking the question seriously and acting upon it, then all would be moving in ways that would both deepen our authentic respective identities and draw us into more intimate relationship. Now, I heard this and I was pretty excited about this because finally it wasn't all about what we already know and therefore we want to share, but it was also about what can I learn and what can I receive. But there was something that was still bothering me because clearly that's not what's happening. That's not what had happened for me or what I was looking for. And what was bothering me was this idea that they were moving towards a deeper, authentic, respective identity, which means that these are different groups that will deepen their identity as a particular group, but are able to come together for a particular mission and work, right? There is still a distinct us and them, right? And then I started thinking, well, of course, the Lutheran Church is working and using accompaniment in such strong and very vibrant, life-giving ways. Maybe that works, this idea of accompaniment. But then I realized that this accompaniment is very much missional. And when you think of mission, for some reason, there's still this underlying idea that there is an us and a them. So for instance, you go on a mission trip and you're thinking accompaniment, there's always this understanding that I'm going to accompany them and they're going to accompany me and then I'll see you later, right? Does that make sense so far? So then that doesn't work again because in some ways, even though I'm affected, I haven't incorporated who they are, right? I haven't adjusted to who they are. I've simply been walked with or have walked with others. So I realized that maybe the better way to think about it was receptive ecclesiology. So what is receptive ecclesiology? I just made it up a couple days ago because I was thinking, well, working ecumenically is a wonderful thing. We need it, of course. There's so much work to be done in this world, and why not work together? But what it means to be a Luthercostal, and I'm just speaking from a Latina perspective, from a Pentecostal perspective, but this is not just limited to what it is to be Latino or Pentecostal. You have people in your congregations that are from Africa, that are from Asia, that are from all different parts of the world, and they're coming with very rich and deep understandings of who God is and how to live out their spirituality. So I was thinking that maybe it would be a good idea to think about engaging in a ministry that was receptive to what others bring to our spaces, so that we don't come and say, this is the Lutheran Church, and we have the right way to do theology, to do church. Instead, say, this is the Church of God. How do you express your relationship with God? What does being church mean to you? How can you share that with me? And then somehow, instead of saying, that's really nice, but we do it better, so let's erase and delete all of your formation and just come become one of us, instead of doing that, to say, you know, there's value and there's richness in what God has done in your life. Let's share. Let's bring that into one space and in one accord. So, receptive ecclesiology implies that there's a welcoming that goes beyond just opening your doors. One of the things that I've learned, especially as a Latina in this church, is that I feel most welcomed when the people that are engaging me understand that my presence will somehow affect them, just as their presence has somehow affected me. There's no way I can be the same. So to be a welcoming church is to be a church that understands that having someone new, that having diversity in your space already implies change, because you cannot be the same. And number two, it implies that you want to incorporate the gifts that they bring, the diversity, the differences that they bring to the table. You want to incorporate that to the point where you appropriate it and make it your own. So my idea for what it might look like to be a more effective church is to engage in receptive ecclesiology, to think about what it would look like to be in a space where everyone can be who they are and not check a part of who they are at the door. To be who they are and be literally and genuinely welcome in a space knowing that they will be affected and so will you. I mean, and to be fair, I'm very, very, very aware that this idea is very messy and can cause some discomfort because no one ever, ever, ever likes change. But, you know, the reality is that the Protestant Reformation isn't something that's historical, isn't something of yesterday. It's something that we continue to participate in. And I truly believe that to be participants in the Protestant Reformation today is to begin engaging in this receptive ecclesiology where I need you and you also need me. Thank you.